we're not going to see the collapse that we saw. What is the biggest difference between this year's Eagles team in 2024 and last year's Eagles team that had the greatest collapse in the history of the NFL? So, Andrew, I will start with you. What is the biggest difference, in your opinion, between this year's Eagles team and last year's Eagles team, and why are we not going to see a collapse?
For me, it's player development, Tom. When you look at, let's start with the defense. Reed Blankenship taking his game to the next level, becoming a leader on the back end. The communication on the back end. Remember last season, everybody was sort of in flux and didn't really seem to know what was going on. They weren't on the same page. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, they're playing out of their minds for rookies. They've actually taken to that position quicker than most rookies do. The linebacker position. Nakobe Dean's taken a huge step forward. Zach Bond, he's never played inside linebacker, so I think Bobby King's done a great job in developing talent there. The defensive line, Jalen Carter's taken a monster step forward. On the offensive side, Grant Calcaterra, Fred Johnson, these are players that now you're seeing growth in pivotal areas. So when they're asked to step in, you're seeing a lot of, they're able to, the moment's not too big for them. So I think, to me, last season you could look at all these different players that were kind of thrust into the spotlight and they weren't really able to meet the moment. This year it's a lot different.
This year it is a lot different. And if there's one thing that really you would link that to, and there's a lot of different variations that go into this, why the team is as successful as they've been this season, why we think it's going to be different, it feels like just from hearing you there, you're relating a lot of that to the coaching staff this year compared to last year. Is that too much for me to say?
No. I think having a veteran coach like Vic Fangio, who's been coaching since 1984, this is his 38th NFL season, and supplementing his coaching staff with guys like Christian Parker, who oversees the defensive backs, Bobby King with the linebackers, Clint Hurt looking at the defensive tackles, and then Kellen Moore and Jeff Stoutland really working with some of those linemen. And, I think Mekhi Becton, who is a tackle by trade, for him to be able to step in and play right guard seamlessly, he had an outstanding game against the Rams. These are things that you weren't seeing last year. Players are actually getting better. If you think about it, Tom, you'd be hard-pressed to find one player on last year's team that showed notable improvement.
Yeah.
If I had to I would have to rack my brain. That would probably be Jordan Mailata if I had to pick one.
And this year you see improvement
across the board.
Everywhere. Yeah, and I do think it's not my answer. I'll get to my answer in a second, but coaching is right there for me because you look at last year, the coaching staff that you had, the combination of Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni, who towards the end of the season had no answers whatsoever, made no adjustments whatsoever. Sirianni said it himself, well, we're not going to motion just the motion, and you see all the motion and how much that's being utilized this year with the Philadelphia Eagles. It was so bad last year offensively that Jalen Hurts was reaching out to opposing coaches to figure out how to deal with the blitz, and that's, of course, Wink Martindale, that story from Tim McManus a few months ago. And we'll talk to Tim McManus at 3 o'clock today. We're going to talk to Eric Carabell at 3:30 to help you win your fantasy championships as playoffs are right around the corner. But you look at offensively the coaching, it was an absolute disaster last year. This year, with Kellen Moore, I think there's still some left to be desired in the passing game. I know a lot of people out there are still waiting for that wow type of game from Jalen Hurts, 300-plus yards, 3 touchdowns. We know how dominant this run game has been. I think people are still waiting on the pass game a little bit. But regardless, other than that, Kellen Moore has been a godsend compared to last year, where you look at this team finding its identity and sticking with it consistently on the offensive side of the ball. That is so key. And then defensively, Sean Desai and Matt Patricia, they were an absolute mess. I thought personally Sean Desai maybe was the scapegoat, was the low-hanging fruit, and probably shouldn't have been fired. But regardless, the combination of the two did not work. That team couldn't stop anybody. This year with Vic Fangio, who's been a coach since 1984, like you mentioned, I know one thing. He comes with experience, and he's able to make adjustments. You see it every single week. Every week.
And he commands a room,
yes,
which I think is huge. And to kind of piggyback off what you were saying, Tom, one of the things that I get asked most often is, what is the difference? Why are you seeing the defense playing as well as they are? It's because there's a collective buy-in. When you have a coach who's done it as long as Vic Fangio has done, and, yeah, he is a tough, old-school-minded head coach or defensive coordinator, but I think when you see results, you're able to buy in more. You're able to, like, okay, what we've been going through is working, and I think that everybody starts to reap the benefits of that tough coaching, and you're seeing it across the board.
And I think last year they were looking for answers from their coaching staff, and they had none. They had no answers. They had no adjustments. This year, even though it hasn't been perfect, the entire season with the two coordinators, Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, they both had their issues. It feels like months ago at this point, but, right, it's been a little bit of a rocky go. It's always going to happen when you have two new coordinators coming in. This year, they're looking for answers. They're looking to their coaching staff for adjustments, and they actually have them, which I think is so key. So that's a big reason, obviously, to you, why this year is different than last year. Silvana Kelleher, fresh off her flight from Los Angeles. How was the game, by the way?
The game was incredible. That stadium is incredible, and it was wildly overtaken by Eagles fans. It was great.
Which we saw on TV, and obviously you saw there.
It was
which
so loud.
is surprising to absolutely nobody because we're the absolute best Eagles fans.
Yep.
I will ask you the same question that we're going to ask the audience that I just asked Andrew DeCecco. I'm guessing you feel relatively confident that this year is going to be different than last year, and we're not going to see that same collapse. I'll start with that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Ever since the bye, I felt that way.
What is the biggest difference to you between this year's Eagles team and last year's Eagles team, which gives you that confidence?
The biggest thing for me is, you guys got into a little bit, but is the defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio. Not only is he experienced, he's a veteran, he's well respected by peers and players. He has done so much for this defense. Not only has he picked one of your best players on the defense to play a new role, and he's become a huge part of this defense, and Zach Bond. Also, you have him playing the best players. He's the one who started out rookie Quinyon Mitchell, who has been absolutely incredible. He obviously had Cooper DeJean going in there after, what was that, the Tampa game? I think he got some snaps
after
in the
the
Tampa
bye
game.
week, yep.
And started. I think it's just his ability to make the correct decisions. He's having the best players play. He's not doing it because of pedigree. He's doing it based off of talent. I think that's incredibly important. He has them disciplined and dominant. How do you take this defense from being one of the worst in the league to being one of the best in the league in a year? And you have a ton of new pieces. I think it is incredible. And this team would not, the biggest issue last year was actually the defense. Obviously, they couldn't get us up. They were one of the worst in the league. And one of the biggest bright spots of this year is the defense. All the playmakers on it, and how young this team is, but how disciplined they are at the same time, and talented.
Yeah, and you see it every single week with Vic Fangio, the answers that he has. And to me, I'll go along with kind of the same thing. You mentioned coaching a little bit as your big answer. Silvana, you mentioned Vic Fangio specifically as the coach that is the biggest difference between this year's team and last year's team. To me, I think all of that is absolutely true. Coaching is extremely important. Guys still have to make plays on the field. Guys still have to execute. That's something that Sirianni says constantly. We have to execute. We didn't execute this, that, the other. The personnel on the field, especially defensively, is the biggest difference to me. Because, yes, Sirianni, Kellen Moore, and Vic Fangio, and all the secondary coordinators, if you will. You mentioned Christian Parker is a big one. Clint Hurt's done a great job here. Some of the new coordinators that they've brought in, assistant coaches that they've brought in, all that's well and good. But if you can't stop anybody, you can't stop anybody. And the Eagles this year, the personnel on defense is night and day compared to last season. And that is my biggest difference from this year to last year. You look at the secondary last year, where it was Darius Slay, who very good cornerback in this league, still is. James Bradbury, he's fourth string safety for the team right now. Avonte Maddox, sparingly playing snaps this year for the Eagles. Very, very rarely. He was your nickel cornerback last year. The safeties were Kevin Byard and Reed Blankenship. Kevin Byard, a guy who never really fit here in Philadelphia. Then you look at the secondary this year, where you mentioned a little bit, Silvana. You have Cooper DeJean, who went toe-to-toe with Cooper Kupp, one of the best slot receivers and receivers in general in this league. Quinyon Mitchell, they're not even throwing at him anymore. Not even throwing at him. Then you have Darius Slay, hopefully can get back for this week in Baltimore. And the safety position, Reed Blankenship, I believe, has taken another step. And CJ GJ is starting to find his footing and become that leader of the defense, too, which I think is so key. Then you look at the linebacking position. The back seven here is so key to me. Last year, you had Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham, two guys who are no longer in football.
I think Morrow's on the Bills, but I don't think Cunningham's in the NFL right now.
Is he Morrow getting starting snaps for the Bills, or no? He's just on the Bills.
Teamer, yeah.
Okay, Cunningham no longer in the league. Morrow no longer a starter. You look at this year, Nakobe Dean has taken a step. That's a guy you've been very, very high on all year long. And Zach Bond, and big shout out to Vic Fangio, he looks like one of the best linebackers in the league. He's getting Defensive Player of the Week votes. That is the biggest difference to me. As much as coaching has a huge impact on this league week in and week out, we see it, and you can tell the difference between this year and last year. The personnel still has to go out there and stop people week in and week out as well, and they're doing it this year where they couldn't last year.
Yeah, I think Vic Fangio, he majors in identifying linebacking talent, and I think Zach Bond was an unknown entity. I don't think you or I or anyone could have foreseen him playing at the level that he's playing right now at all. In training camp, you saw flashes. He was highly intelligent. He was processing things quickly. He diagnoses very fast. And those are critical elements to have playing linebacker in Vic's system, where a lot of responsibility is placed on both positions. And then you have someone like the Kobe Dean, who I believe is the tone setter on that defense. He's very cerebral. He wears the green dot, so he has full understanding of what's going on the first, second, and third level, and he plays with physicality. You saw the play that he had against Kyron Williams where he jacked up the running back, sacked Matthew Stafford. That's the style that he plays, and I've had many conversations with the Kobe Dean this season about an identity and how he viewed the defense, and he said, we're going to be that junkyard style, tough, gritty defense that you can't just plan for one player. You have to worry about all of us. We all floated the football. And I asked him a couple weeks ago, I said, are you there yet? He goes, we're getting there, and he smiled. So I think they still have yet to play their best football, which is incredible to think.
Which is crazy to say. It really is. So there it is. What is the biggest difference to you between this year's Eagles team and last year's Eagles team? And the word of the day, of course, thankful, because out of all the things I'm thankful for here in Philadelphia with our sports teams, I'm just thankful that last year seems like a fluke with this Eagles team. The greatest collapse potentially in the history of the NFL. It feels like a fluke. What is the biggest reason that this year is going to be different than last year? We'd love to hear from you at 610-632-0975. We got a ton to get into today. As I mentioned, we'll be talking to Tim McManus at 3 o'clock. He'll be down there at practice. Got a little bit of news from practice where we are without, once again, a key player on the offensive side of the ball. We'll tell you who that is on the other side. Going to be talking to Eric Karabell at 3:30 as we try and win you your fantasy championships with playoffs right around the corner. Jalen Hurts set to be speaking in the 4 o'clock hour. They say 4 o'clock is, 4:35, 4:40, who knows?
5:15.
Usually like 30 minutes late.
30 minutes, awesome. Can't wait. So we'll be hearing from Jalen Hurts and a whole lot more. Going to be touched on the Sixers as well. We'll talk a little Phillies a little bit later on. And also, it's Thanksgiving tomorrow. One of the most underrated holidays, in my opinion. We're going to do a little bit of fun, underrated and overrated Thanksgiving dishes that we're going to be seeing tomorrow on the dining room table.